Alright, so it's been a while, hasn't it? I've been working on a couple different projects. Matter of fact, one's down behind me here, but that's something for a later date. So, I've been working on the radio that you saw in the last video, or one of the last videos, and that radio also has a record player. I got the mechanics working of it. It had a small clockwork mechanism in it in order to not flip the disc, but you can essentially set a bunch of records on top of the post, and then as it turns, once it gets all the way into the inside, it hits the next hits the record stack, and then it drops one down, so it plays the next record. But the person who owns it also wanted me to redo the turntable. The turntable was originally flocked, so it had essentially small fabric fibers that were put on, and essentially they were glued on, so this way it'd be nice and soft so you didn't scratch up your records. So I stripped the plate down already. I gave it a coat of self-etching primer, and then on top of the self-etching primer I did a coat of filler primer, and then 2 coats of a red tinted primer in order to get a darker brown. And then I painted the brown over top of it. Without the primer, the brown was really a lot lighter, and it would have ended up looking copperish. It still might actually with the flocking. So what I'm going to be doing today is taking this. I'll spray one more coat of brown paint, and while it's still wet, then I'll go and flock it, and that's what we're going to be doing today, is flocking this turntable. And so I'm going to go take this outside because it's relatively cold out there, and the paint I use, if it's cold, when you apply it, it doesn't dry as fast, so it stays tacky longer, which is good for this case, because you want it to stay wet, so this way when you put the flocking on it, the flocking sticks to the paint, and that's essentially what you do. Most places that sell flocking also sell a special paint that they use, but that stuff's expensive, and not only that, it didn't have the color that I was looking for. This was a closer match to the original color, which if I flip this over, it was a darker brown. So now another thing I had to do in order to be able to flock is you have to have a flocking gun. So you can either buy them, which a lot of times if they're a mini gun, they're usually 2 tubes of cardboard fitted together, and you sit there and pump it back and forth, and it shoots out the flocking in a spray pattern. But I was cheap, and I didn't want to pay $9 for 2 tubes of cardboard, so I went out, bought 2 5-foot section of CPVC, and I think this is it's a half, and I think this is a 1 inch, and then there's a cap on this end with a little bit of electrical tape in order to help provide a better seal, and then down here there's a cap with 3 holes drilled in it, and essentially you just pump it, and there's enough airflow in there to force out the flocking. So it's just a cheap little way to do it, and it works. That's the tool that I'll be using for my flocking gun. So I'm going to go paint this, and then I'll bring it back down. There is one trick though, or that I read up while learning about how to do this, is you want to keep it at the same angle and just keep covering it. You can in this case, it's better to add more than not enough, because once you get done and let it dry for a couple hours, you can take it, tip it over, and all the excess will fall off, and then you can recollect it and save the excess, so this way you're not wasting any. So I'm going to go paint this, and I'll be right back. Alright, so we have our table painted. So now we are going to, wish I had a funnel. I have some, I think, over in the other room, but I want to get this done fast before the paint dries. Although it shouldn't. It usually takes like 10-20 minutes for this stuff to dry up. So fill that up, drop a whole bunch on myself. The one thing about using CPVC if you're going to do this, is it does have an electrostatic charge to it, so it does kind of I hope I held that the right way too. Now you only got one chance at doing this too. At least directly speaking, I should say. I mean, you can strip it and retry it. One of the things that you're supposed to do with this is actually go a little overboard when it comes to the flocking part. Okay, yeah. Need more. So you can always put too much on and dump the excess off. Whereas if you put too little on, you can't add any more to it once it's dry. So that's what I'm doing right now. Another thing, make sure you go a little heavier on the top coat of paint, so this way it takes a little bit longer to dry. Don't get runs in it though. Although your paint job doesn't need to be perfect because you're going to be covering it up with flocking, it helps just to give you that extra bit of security. Now, I'm going to go get a little pin here, and maybe we can, let's dust off here real quick too. And I'm going to try to push my piece of tape that I have in there up and through, so this way I don't have to worry about removing it next time. So, lift this up. I have a razor somewhere. Don't try this at home, kids. At least this part. Flocking, go ahead. As long as you ask your parents first. So. Yeah, that's it right there. This is where it would be helpful if I had 3 hands. But, make do with what you got. Right? So there's the top, nice and newly flocked. That's how it looks right now. Let's try to get it in somewhat close. Nice, flat. The edges, that kind of actually resembles what the edges were. They weren't never really covered too good anyway. But I can, you know what? Let's just try to get that covered up. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to just continue doing this, and then I'll bring you guys back when when the whole thing's dry, and I can show you what it looks like on the actual record player. So, I will see you then. Alright, so it's fully flocked now. There aren't any dead spots, so that's what it looks like. It's not dry yet, but I just wanted to show you guys how that looks. Alright, so the flocking has finally dried up, nice and velvety. So I even coated around the edges, as you see, in order to essentially make it look like it would have before. I'm going to show you how this works. Essentially down under here there's a universal motor, and they look something like this. Essentially, these are used in a lot of like window fans and stuff like that. Essentially, you put in 120 in. Well, this one has 3 wires because it has a 2-speed, but you put 120 in here, and it'll go in and goes into this transformer, produces induction, causes this to spin. And there's an older one down in there. It's actually really cool. I don't know if I'll show you it or not, but instead of being wrapped in this tape or anything like that, it's wrapped in a cloth. So that's the first time I've ever seen that. But essentially, that spins. There's a wheel over here. Comes up. The rotor rests against a wheel that has a rubber ring around it, which I had to remake out of an O-ring. And there's a round, essentially driver on this, and it spins that, and that spins the table. Then over here there is another wheel with a rubber liner on it that gets driven by the table, and then that drives the whole mechanism over here. So without further ado, let's see what's happening. Oh, okay. So right now, technically the record is playing, and once I go and I'll move this in, there it went. Now it lifts back, sets down. Now it's going to go back in. So this right up here, there's a little chrome arm that comes out. Essentially, you have this turned, set your record right on this little shelf on this shaft, and then you have one down here. It'll start playing this record. Once it gets done, and this comes back, this pushes out, and your record should be, sitting right at this edge. So this way when it gets hit, it drives one record down and it sets down and it starts playing the next one. I don't know how many records you can actually get it to play without having an issue, but I know it can at least do 2. And then this is the tone cartridge right here. And essentially there's some crud. I can't remember what the name of it is. But essentially they take stresses and turn it into electricity. So kind of like what you do with a lighter, or, well, not your normal cigarette lighter, but like a grill igniter, where you press it and you hear that click, and then it ignites. That's essentially what's in here, is that little thing that's in there that makes it click. So every time this bounces up, it produces produces varying electrical signals. Everything's pretty much done on this, except for, as I said, making the adjustment here, and then putting this back on. So that's essentially the gist of this. Not much was done in terms of remachining, except here, I'll pull this off and show you what we did underneath here. It's a little tight because I had to make new rubber bushings. That older motor is starting to give some problems, as you saw originally. So this is the brand new rubber I put on this pulley. I pulled this pulley off, or wheel, and I cleaned it up, and then I used some gun blue and I blued it up, which is how it was originally, and then oiled it so this way it doesn't rust again. It had some rust on it before. And then here we have this pulley, which I made completely brand new because this was the original pulley. And as you can see, come on, focus. There's these small cracks in here, and that's all zinc pest. So eventually this will end up just kind of disintegrating. So I didn't want to do anything with that. And if I would have cut this rubber off, it probably would have just disintegrated. But I just made that all one piece. This way there's no chance of it spinning inside of itself or anything like that. So yeah, here's the universal motor, as I said, and there's that cloth. I don't know really what that cloth is, but I didn't want to I don't know how to rebuild these motors, so I wasn't going to tear this apart and rebuild it. If the owner decides that he wants this sent out and rebuilt, I'll take it off and give it to him and let him send it out to have it rebuilt. You can see all brand new lines. All this stuff was old and corroded and just shot. This is our switch that you saw me moving it up here. So this essentially turns this on and off, or turns this motor on and off. And then the rest of the switch is all mechanized choices. So here's the rubber O-ring, which, oh, that ain't good. My nut fell off. I had to put some Loctite on there, but I wasn't exactly done with that anyway. There we go. So yeah, this drives this wheel, which does absolutely nothing other than driving this wheel. So this is our idler, and then this gets turned, and then under here, this arm, or the tone arm, is connected to this arm. Okay, you can kind of see what I'm pointing at. So this arm here, it rides in a channel on the bottom side of this gear, and essentially it just allows this to be picked up and moved back and forth. You can kind of, I don't know if you can kind of see it moving there. Essentially that moves or allows the arm to move, or moves the arm forcefully up and out of the way. And then around this gear, you can't, I'd have to spin this and I don't want to. Around this gear, there's a little track that raises and lowers in order to raise and lower that tone arm, so this way it doesn't scratch your record when it's coming off. And then this guy right here, he rides on this track, which is what does the pushing of the records. This way it engages the second, or engages the arm up top that I showed you, and it pushes the record and makes it fall down, so this way you can get the second record going. I didn't touch up any of the paint because this is the closest paint I could find. I had to remake this piece right here. The other one, it was zinc yet again, and what they did was they had the zinc go through, and then they pressed the bottom side. Can you even see my hand? Yeah, okay. They pressed the bottom side flat, and so this way that would hold that, so this way it wouldn't move back and forth. So what I did was I took a piece of aluminum, matched the taper, matched the height, and then drilled through the bottom, and there's just a kind of it's essentially, I made another piece out of aluminum, threaded it, and then it threads into here, so this way I can lock it down, and then I put Loctite in there, so that will never, well, unless you really try, it won't come loose. And then here's the bottom side of that other pin that I made. So this has been kind of one of my, kind of the bane of my existence here for the past couple months, trying to figure out how each thing needs to work, and then not only that, trying to figure out what I need for the rubber and stuff like that. It took me a while to figure out. Just use O-ring stock, and you should be good. So that's about everything on this part of the project. And then next, I'll kind of just show you I'll walk around to the cabinet and everything, and how I finished up didn't finish the cabinet, but how I hooked up everything, and made it where there's a new speaker in there, but the old speaker is still used, stuff like that. And then I'm going to be fixing the face of the radio, the dial. It's bent a little bit, so I have to unheat it up. It's plastic, and I need to unbend it, and then I'll have to 3D print some buttons for it. So this, because it didn't have any buttons when the owner brought it to me. So yeah, I'll design that and print them out, and they'll have to be painted, and that's about it. And then the owner can come pick this up.